Here we are, we're live, folks. I'm gonna open up the chat here. Okay. People jump in a moment, I would think. So let me ask you, when was the last time you were in Canada?
Oh gosh, it's been a while. When was the last time I was in Canada? Because you know, when you're from here, going over there,
yeah,
you don't
exactly.
do it as often. You know what? It was about a year ago. I met one of my former coworkers was in Toronto, and so I went, but I just went over the border to Niagara Falls because they wanted to see the falls. So I came over. Yeah, so it was about a year ago. Not this past summer, but the summer, obviously because of COVID, but the summer before.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I was there in the days when, and I'm sure you remember it, but you know, it was just so easy to go across the border. It was just,
yeah, you can walk, right? Take the bridge right
exactly.
across.
And
Yeah.
I mean, that's right.
And I listen. I worked at the Niagara Gazette, so I was right down there where I could walk over. Yeah.
And we, I can remember going to the Shaw Festival and coming back, and the border security at the Canadian border was like, "Oh, what'd you see?" I'm trying to go see that. You know,
yeah.
that was the level of questioning.
Right.
We have 27 people in the room. Hi, everybody. We'll get started in about 3 or 4 minutes here. We're just waiting for people to get in the room. Excuse me, 1 second. I just have to shut a door.
Yep.
Can I ask you a stupid question? Is the news still in the same building? Or...
It is. It is. Yep. With the same carpet stains you probably saw while you were there. So not much has changed. Still has that old newsroom charm there.
At least they're not smoking anymore.
Right. I've heard of those stories. Yeah, they had stopped that by the time I got there, but I heard stories about that. Let me tell you. Yeah, some newsroom fights. Yeah, I heard a lot of stories of funny things that happened before I got there. Yeah, it was relatively calm my 18 and a half years there.
That's my reminder that we're starting now. Give it one more minute and then we'll get rolling here. Okay, I'm going to get us started here. Hi, everybody. Welcome to tonight's installation of the Journalism Forum. Thanks to Will Yerman for all his work putting this series together. Tonight, we're very pleased to have our guest, Lisa Wilson, who's here in a couple of roles. She's an editorial director of The Athletic, which is probably the premier daily sports journalism media outlet at this point in this country. And so she's what that means is she's one of four on a senior management team. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. She's also the president of the Associated Press Sports Editors, which is the professional body of sports editors across the country. So pretty prestigious gigs on both counts. Lisa, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Hey, John, thank you so much for having me.
We're going to go all over the map, and we really welcome your questions starting now. I'll just watch the chat, and Q&A is fine too, but chat's probably a little makes life easier for me looking in one place. I guess I just want to get started, Lisa, by asking you what you're excited about. I mean, this has been, insert your superlative here about how crazy a news year this has been, but it's had a particular way of filtering down to the sports realm. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about what you see as the most important stories going on right now.
Yeah, well, so I would talk mostly from the NFL point of view because, I've only been an editorial director about 2 weeks. Just got promoted, which is great. But, for 2 years, since 2018, I've been the NFL managing editor at The Athletic. So I think what I've been watching since March and still watching, and it's actually picking up in the news this week, is just how the NFL is going to navigate the COVID-19 pandemic. And is the question was the season going to start on time? And for a while you wondered, right, how could they, in April, we're thinking, how could they possibly play football this fall, right? And they're going to have to cancel. But everything on the NFL schedule stayed according to plan, because when we started, it was free agency, but this was when everything was starting to shut down. All the leagues were shutting down and, everyone had their stay-at-home orders. And we're wondering at work, every day, are we going to have free agency? They're going to have to push this back at least a couple of weeks. Well, no, that went according to schedule because they could do it remotely. The draft stayed on track because that could be done remotely and in many ways was better than the draft ever was. It was actually one of my most enjoyable drafts that I can remember in many years. Just, seeing all the coaches and everybody at home, it was just kind of cool, just a different experience. So that worked better than expected. They canceled the off-season program. That was to be expected. But then when we're getting around June, I'm talking with the national writers and we're like, oh, they're going to have to push training camp back, right? Training camp can't possibly start. Training camp starts on time. They have their ramp up period. And then, everything is, for the players, it's different, obviously, because, they weren't right in pads. It took till mid-August really to get there. So that was very different. But training camp stayed on track. The season started on time and, and they've had relatively few positive cases and everyone's wondering, how is this happening? It's a sport that's not in the bubble because obviously NBA, NHL, they're in a bubble. So they're able to control it a little bit better. They're not able to do that in the NFL. And now they've just had some positive tests on the Titans. their game with the Steelers is postponed this week, and just kind of how the league manages this from here. You know, is this just the start of something that might happen, or will this be relatively contained? That's what I've been watching since March and still going to be watching. Can the NFL season start and finish on time? Is
You know,
the story for me.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, the NFL seems to be like the most immutable league. Like nothing is, you know, you'd have to be, you know, basically, you know, Keith Richards to be as durable as the NFL is.
Right.
You know, it just can go through basically anything to get to the Super Bowl, which is, you know, probably going to be quite an interesting end to the season.
Yeah.
Presuming we get that far. It's supposed to be in Tampa, but
right. How many fans will be there? If fans,
yeah, we're
you know,
probably
it's a lot we're still trying to figure out there.
So, um, can you explain to us a little bit about day in the life of, you know, in the NFL role, and then in your new role, how you ultimately expect it to shake down? The Athletic, even before this, didn't operate in, you know, one giant newsroom. You're spread across the country, so
yeah, it's a remote newsroom. Yeah.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little? Can you describe that a little bit?
You're talking about the NFL job versus my new role.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So I've only been in that a couple of weeks, you know, and kind of what I know about it is, you know, so my direct supervisor is an editorial director, and now I'm on the same level as my direct supervisor. So, you know, I know a little bit about the role from him. If we'd done this a month from now, I probably would have some answers, because with a new management team, obviously, duties are going to get shifted. You know, we're going to be doing different things. But I guess the easiest way to explain it would be, you know, at the Athletic, I've had just a tunnel vision view of the NFL. That's my area. You know, when I'm dealing with, you know, obviously I'm reading other stories, but, you know, I'm not responsible for the coverage in those other verticals at all. Just the NFL kind of runs through me and through the city editors, and we work together. But now I'm going to have more of a role in shaping coverage in the other sports, which is very exciting. You know, it kind of gets back to my roots a little bit when I was at the Buffalo News. You know, it wasn't just football. It was hockey, it was colleges, it was high schools, you know, so I'm kind of getting back to that, where I just have a little bit more of maybe putting my touch on some stuff that's going on, which is very exciting.
Let's talk the NFL role specifically. Can you walk us a little bit through a day in the life?
So I'm the vertical head. A vertical is what, you know, this is your NFL coverage, this is your NBA, this is your NFL. So I'm over the NFL group. My direct reports of reporters, the ones who directly report to me, I do their performance reviews, would be the national staff, because I'm the national editor. That would be, you know, writers you probably heard of, Mike Sando, Lindsey Jones, Dane Brugler, who does our draft coverage. They're my direct reports. The beauty of the Athletic is we also have beat writers, and we used to be in every NFL city. Now it's a movement within the company. We're in 30 of the 32 cities. We have a beat writer. So that seems like, wow, you know, you have to edit 30 writers. That seems like a lot for one human to do. And if it seems that way, that's because it is. There's no way I would be able to edit all that copy. So they have local editors. So the Patriots writer reports to the Boston editor. The Vikings writers report to, there's an editor in Minneapolis. But as the NFL group leader, I have a dotted line, to all those local editors, meaning if something breaks with the Vikings, a lot of times maybe national won't be on it first. We're talking to the local team. Okay, are you on this? What do you got? You know, can we work together on this? I'm coordinating that. So, you know, so that's kind of how it goes, just dictating and kind of setting the tone and the coverage for the Athletics NFL. And it's great. The thing that's really great about local and national is just the collaboration, just getting to work with the other writers in other cities. And, you know, the national writers like to work with the local writers. So it's just a great kind of collaborative group to be a part of.
Let me just 30,000 foot view it for a sec for people who might not be, if we have particularly maybe broadcast students who haven't or underclassmen
Sure.
who are in this, who don't subscribe to The Athletic. It was founded a few years ago by a couple of guys from one guy from Penn State, another guy from Notre Dame, and they had the concept that, you know, we're going to get the best beat writers and we're going to tell like sort of deeper, more interesting, better written stories than just sort of the daily grist of injury reports and you know, sort of the transactional news, hirings, firings, all those
Sure.
sorts of things kind of go deeper and bigger and more writerly. And so that's part of what's and people were skeptical of it at first. It started in a few cities and then moved across and then built out across the country. But you've hit 1 million subscribers, yes? I believe,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
And that leads into a question from Jacob Farriott, who is one of the heads of our student APSE chapter, who asks, when it comes to telling stories, what advantages does The Athletic have in that regard that reporters are working for other outlets may not?
Okay, so I guess I can kind of speak to this from the Buffalo News, how we would handle it, and then The Athletic. So at the Buffalo News, there's a paper to put out as well, right? So there's a news hole that we have to fill. So we know we've got 15 inches devoted for Bill's notebook. We've got another maybe 20 inches for a main story that day, and we're going to need something no matter what. You know, now if there's some kind of emergency and you can't fill it, there's always a wire, right? But you don't want to fill up your local paper with wire. You want to have your Bills coverage. That's why people, you know, are reading the paper,
Right.
and picking up the sports section. A lot of times, you know, you lived here in Buffalo, so you know that's the Bills are
Yes,
king. That's what everyone wants to read. So you're going to want to give people what they're looking for daily, their Bills coverage. The Athletic, I mean, and it's not just because there is no print edition involved, because, you know, it's the same way at ESPN and some other outlets that don't actually, you know, it's not a traditional newspaper. But the beauty of The Athletic is giving writers time to kind of work the locker room back when that's a thing, you know, and I'm going to be speaking a lot about how things normally are. Obviously, some things have changed during the pandemic and all the, you know, the access is on Zoom now. But under normal circumstances, you know, we give a writer, I'll use our Colts writer because I think he does a really good job, Stephen Holder. You know, he used to be at the Indy Star, now he covers the Colts. And one of the main things he says, and this kind of just, I think, kind of sums up the story of, you know, why The Athletic is so appealing to some writers and how it might be different from papers, that if he goes out to a Colts practice, he doesn't necessarily have to have a story that day. If there's, you know, unless there's something big that happened and he thought maybe he had to jump to get on it, he would have a little time to go out there and maybe look for a story or something offbeat and have a time to do it. He wouldn't have that pressure. I got to get 15 inches in by 7 o'clock. You know, we don't really operate that way. You know, you want to have, you know, by the end of the week, you want to hit 4 or 5 stories, right? But every day you're not under that pressure to have a story where you might at a newspaper. So Stephen says a lot of times he'll go out there and he'll go into the locker room really with no plan. You know, he'll just kind of go out there, observe, see what's going on, see if there's some kind of story he can get, you know. So maybe if somebody's not in there, you know, and he might find out about maybe their training habits, maybe they spend like 2-3 hours in the trainer's room before they come in because he's not in the locker room. He can kind of sit back, observe, and maybe come up with a story he didn't even think he was going to do when he went out there. And I think by The Athletic giving the writers time to kind of find those stories, I think that's part of the reason we've done so well, because, you know, we get to do some pretty offbeat things. Same on game day. You know, game day, a lot of times you have to push the button right after the game, right? You have a game story you have to get up. That's just the way many outlets, that's how they operate. That's how the Buffalo News operated. You would need something right after the game. We want to get it online. The Athletic, we don't want that story right away. We want you to kind of stay in the locker room. Maybe you get the last guy that's in there and you get some quotes that no one else has, and you come up with like a different perspective, different viewpoint on the game that no one has, and it kind of resonates the next day. So I think that's the main thing. You know, there isn't always that rush to get a story out. So, you know, a lot of times, you know, if it's not a breaking news situation, you have a little bit of time to sit back and kind of develop something that's really cool, give you the time to work on it.
That's really interesting. I mean, it fits with sort of, honestly, how I've just fallen into reading The Athletic, which is not to get breaking. It's like my next day read, my coffee read the next day for my teams.
Yeah, it's funny. We call it the second day story today. That's how a lot of our stories out. Now, we've changed a little bit too. We now actually, we started in September a breaking news product that lives outside the paywall, some headlines. Just, I think that's just because, you know, people are on our app all the time, right? And if something's breaking, because we give writers time to develop a story, you know, and that goes with breaking news a lot of times too, because a lot of times we might want to get not so much the what, but the why, you know, and how, and give you a little bit of time to kind of, okay, we know this just happened, but why did it happen? And what does it mean? So to give you some time to kind of work that and develop it, you might not have that 500 words up immediately when it happens, right? But I think just, you know, in talking to readers through the years, I think they wanted to see something. So we've kind of done that outside the paywall, but writers maybe have come in, maybe give you 50 words on a brief, and then they can still go on and do that second day story today. So it's changed a little bit, but writers still have the time to work on things, which is very nice.
One of the, your example of the Colts story, or the Colts writer, it strikes me that you've got to have a depth of knowledge of your subject.
Yes.
That is at a really high level to be able to walk in and not have some idea of what you're going to do today. Because
and The Athletic, you know, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but a lot of the people we have in those cities were covering that team and just kind of, they've been on that team for many years. So they have that institutional knowledge and those sources where they can do that. It's just, they feel like, wow, I'm finally at a place where I really just have time to write, really sit back and write something and take some time and write something that I'm really proud of, rather than just churning it out every day.
Right. Let's pull back a little bit from the athletic stuff, and let me just ask you a little bit about your path.
Sure.
You're Buffalonian.
I am.
And Canisius college graduate, and tell us about how you got into journalism and your career at the Buffalo News before all these huge jumps started to happen.
Okay, well, I guess I have to start back to maybe when I was 10, 11. You know, I wasn't a huge sports fan at that point in my life, I'll have to admit. But I did have two older brothers who were crazy sports fans. And that was the day where you had maybe one or two TVs in the house. Well, I'm dating myself, but this is a while, right? And there's no devices to watch stuff on, right? You got your TV. And so I would be sitting around and they would be watching sports, and generally they won the fight for the TV, right? So eventually I was just kind of like, okay, I guess if I want to watch TV, I better watch football or whatever they're watching. And as I would sit there with them, they would explain it to me, and I started to really like enjoy the game. And I really got into football because of my brothers, you know, and their passion for it that rubbed off on me. And so I would actually start writing, it's funny, to the Buffalo News. I'd start writing letters to the sports editor, you know, about the Bills and Sabres and just so many things. And I didn't know that one day I would actually be that sports editor, but this is back when I was in high school. Sure. And so people would see, you know, this is in the Sunday Buffalo News, the letters to the editor. People would see them, you know, people would call my mom or call me and say they saw the letter and say, wow, you know, you're good. You know what I mean? You have a knack for this. Have you ever thought about doing this for a career? And because of that encouragement, I thought, well, I enjoy sports. Maybe I do want to go into sports media, you know? I thought I was probably going to be on TV, because that's what everybody does, right? When you dream of being on TV and, you know, being a sideline reporter or being a broadcaster. But you mentioned Canisius College, and I was a communication major there. And we had a class we took, it was called Ecumedia News. And what Ecumedia News was, you know, it dealt mostly with religious news. And we would go to Channel 2, that's the local NBC affiliate. We'd go there every Saturday, and we'd put on a newscast that got recorded, you know, a half-hour show called Ecumedia News, and it would run on Sunday. And in that class, you got to learn a little bit of everything. You know, I took it twice. I took it as a reporter and I took it as a producer. So when I took it as a reporter, you know, you would go out and learn how to like put together packages, but you also would have to we'd rotate in who would anchor the show. So, you know, when I would anchor the show, I found when I watched the broadcast, I had a head twitch. And I'm like, why is my head was moving ever so slightly. And I don't know why. And I knew this. And so the next time I would go on, I would say, okay, keep your head still. couldn't do it, right? So I'm like, wow, I don't know about a career in TV. This might not be the best idea, but I do like to write. So maybe, you know, I will just stick with wanting to be a sports writer. And that's how it worked out for me. You know, I graduated from Canisius, and, you know, this is what I talk to students about all the time. You know, don't be discouraged if you don't have something right when you get out of college, because I didn't work in the business for a year. I worked at TJ Maxx, where I worked in college. I didn't have a job when I graduated, and they had an opening during the day in their cash office. And they said, we know you want to really get into journalism, but you don't have anything. We have a full-time job. Do you want it? You know, while you're waiting to try to find something, you know, because I worked there for a while, and, you know, had a good relationship with my bosses. So I said, sure. So I worked out of the business for a year. And then one night I'm just home, and I'm still living with my mom. I get a call. It's one of my professors from Canisius, Barry Berlin. I'll never forget it. It was just a random call on a Thursday night. And he's like, Lisa, it's Barry Berlin. And I'm like, oh, hey, how are you? You know, I had him for maybe 4 or 5, you know, Canisius is a smaller school. So I had him for maybe 4 or 5 journalism classes. And he asked me, are you still interested in journalism? And I said, I am. You know, I haven't been able to find anything, but I'm certainly interested. So he told me that there was a position in Utica, New York, for a reporter, and would I be interested in going to interview? And I said, sure. So I go interview in Utica, and it wasn't going to be in sports, but I'm like, okay, you know, I'm trying to get into the business, so I'm going to go take the interview anyway. It didn't work out, but they were a Gannett paper, and the Niagara Gazette was also at the time owned by Gannett. So they called to say, okay, we're sorry, we don't have a position to offer you here, but we do have a 3-month paid internship at the Niagara Gazette, if you're interested. So then I had a decision to make. So I have a job in my field, but it's not guaranteed past 3 months. So I'm like, do I leave a full-time job to go take this on, and maybe there's nothing for me after 3 months? But I said, you know what, I want to get into journalism, and I'm just going to take this chance and go do it. So I went and took the 3-month paid internship, and it wasn't in sports, and that was where my heart was desiring to go into sports. It was actually covering town government, and I hated it, but it was good just to kind of get just another, you know, kind of that news background and a feel of how you cover things and what happens when they go in executive session. And I learned a lot in that 3 months. But before my internship was up, it just so happened that someone in the sports department left, and they knew that I had a desire to be in sports, because I made that known when I went in there. And they offered me the job as a sports reporter. And that's kind of when my career took off from there. I got latched on at the Niagara Gazette. I was a sports writer, and at a paper that size, you do many things, right? I covered the Buffalo Bills. I covered high schools. I covered Niagara University, did a lot of things, you know, Little League. There's like so much to do with the community paper, right? So I did a lot of things there, and had quite a path there. I went from sports writer to features editor. When it opened again, I'm going out of sports, but trying to move up, right? There's an editor's role that's open, features editor. And, you know, in sports, I was a writer, but I would do some desk shifts. So I had a little bit of an understanding of how to lay out a paper. And I was starting to actually enjoy that, you know, just kind of having a hand in shaping the paper. What's the lead story? What's your main image on, you know, your main image on the page? It was very interesting. So I took the features job because I wanted that, you know, just to kind of take, you know, try my hand at management. And so I had that it was less than a year. And then the guy who was my sports editor got a job in Las Vegas. So I got the sports editor job at the Niagara Gazette, had that for about a year. And then that's when I got the call about the Buffalo News was looking for a copy editor. So again, I have another decision to make. You'll notice a trend in my career. I had a decision to make. Do I leave a job as a sports editor to go take a job as a copy editor? So I'm weighing the pros and cons. I'm like, yes, it's a copy editor's job, but, you know, if you're in Buffalo, that's kind of where you want to be, the Buffalo News, right? You know, you want to be at the larger paper for, you know, kind of opportunity to kind of grow in your career in advance. So I took that at the Buffalo News. This was 98. And I had several positions there. You know, I started as a copy editor, kind of got moved on to a layout editor because I had that experience. Move up to assistant sports editor. And then our sports editor ended up taking a buyout a couple of years later. And I was one of 3 assistants. And then I got tapped to be the executive sports editor. So I took that job and had that for a few years until I made my move to the Undefeated, ESPN's The Undefeated. Had that for 17 months. And then decided to make the jump to The Athletic because, you know, I'm at ESPN, right, a premier outlet on a doing very important work, right? The Undefeated, that's the intersection of race, sports, and culture, you know, and I loved the job. But when someone offers you a chance to run NFL coverage nationally, and also to be able to move home and do it remotely, because you talked about the Athletic being a remote newsroom, and this is before doing things remotely and on Zoom was really a thing. I said, I'm going to take that chance. It's not every day you get offered a chance to run national NFL coverage. And so I decided to take that chance, and here I am 2 years later.
You one thing I noticed is you keep saying yes to opportunity.
Yes.
Even
if it's not exactly what you had planned. I think being flexible in journalism is always very important, because sometimes you have to it might not be your dream job, but sometimes take the job that you're offered, because if you do a job and do it well, I think it leads to better things always, right? So, it might not be exactly what you're looking for, but sometimes you just got to take a chance and kind of, like I say, bet on yourself and really take those chances in this business.
We were emailing earlier this week, and I'm going to share my screen here. This is maybe a good moment to transition to this, because of your work on the Undefeated. And I asked you about, is there a story that you recommend maybe that we talk about? And I gave this to my class to take a look at. And it's this inside story on the statement that Roger Goodell made earlier this summer on the Black Lives Matter, after several of these killings of Black people by police, and in one case a sort of vigilante group. I'm just wondering if you can talk about why you chose this story, what it's got that you like, and also we're talking here about subjects that are sensitive. I don't mean that in like, gee, goodness gracious, we might offend someone, but like, but handling issues of race and culture fairly that are so intensely subjective and personal. So if you want, that's a lot. That's a big question, but maybe if you want to start with telling us a little bit about the story itself.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about kind of how this story came together, because I was talking earlier just about collaboration being one of the things that I really like about working at a newsroom as large as The Athletic, with people who are based in cities, but also national writers who kind of are over the entire league. So this was written by Jordan Rodrigue, she covered the Carolina Panthers for us, and she was at the Charlotte Observer before that. She now covers the Rams for us. She's moved on from that beat. So at the time, she was kind of transitioning to that role.
Let me just interject. Before that, she was at the Center Daily Times covering Penn State football. So
that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, and she's a very, very talented writer. But what I like about this story is Jordan got the tip that, kind of the background on this is, the NFL came out with a weak statement, after the George Floyd killing, really didn't address racism. It was just a kind of a bland statement. And so shortly after that, players came out, I remember it was Michael Thomas on there, Mahomes, Watson, here's what you should have said, Black Lives Matter. I remember they were saying, I'm George Floyd, they're kind of just going through, that was it. So when that video came out, it was like, wow, the players just put out this video basically calling out the league saying, you're not doing enough about this and your statement was weak. What are you going to do? This is what you should have said. So that was that night it came out. The next day, Jordan said she got a tip that this video came together, at the hands of someone who worked in the NFL office. And she's like, is anybody on this? Can I look into it? And we're like, no, we don't, we haven't heard of this. Yeah, let's look into it. And I kind of put her in touch with Lindsay, who's a national writer who has a lot of contacts in the NFL office. So this is a perfect example of, national and local working together to get this big story. Now they were first with this, which is great. But even if they weren't, what's great about this story is that they really dug in to find out how this happened. How did this video come together? And that's what I really like about it. So they got, they found the person who actually put it together. And it's really someone who works on the social team who was, after like some meetings of some of the league employees, and they're just, I guess what was coming out the next couple of days after the statement was going to be just some regular football news. And they just didn't think that that was enough that the league was doing. This person in the league office, a league employee, he took it upon himself to inbox Michael Thomas on Instagram to say,
Right.
hey, would you want to do this? And Michael Thomas is like, I'm in. So then Michael Thomas gets, other players, then big time, like Ezekiel Elliott, Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, to send clips, and they put this together for the players. And Jordan Lindsay kind of dug in to find out how that happened, and kind of what led up to that, which is meetings, in the league offices, a couple of them with the league's Black employees just not happy about what was going on in the response. And, one of the meetings was supposed to be 75 minutes, I think, originally, and Lindsay and Jordan found out that it went 3 hours. And
Right.
then the next meeting was with Goodell, and once, the video came out and Goodell had this meeting, he knew it was time to respond. So then he came out with a second video where he's like, okay, we believe Black Lives Matter, and we're sorry we didn't listen to the players earlier, and came out with this response to this video that was put together by people who work for him. So it was just a very interesting story and dynamic of what was going on there. And I really like how Lindsay and Jordan worked together to get this. And you'll see the top, there's a note saying it's been updated because they kept working it throughout the weekend because more people were kind of coming forward from the league office to kind of give them even more background on what was going on. So the way this developed was great, and just, I think, a perfect example of what we can do at our outlet is kind of, leverage our network of writers and kind of work together to get this story. And even if you're not first with the story, if you can kind of get what happened and go behind the scenes and pull back the curtain, I mean, like I said, sometimes that's even more valuable. And I think something that we do well at The Athletic.
I think it does a great job because it gets at the league's reticence to make the statements, their timidity. And I mean, it just basically took one employee essentially freelancing it to make it happen. And I just want to show really quick to all of the aspiring writers out here. You have basically a recap of the week's events, and then they've embedded the video, and then you have essentially your nut graph. His phrasing wasn't an accident, and the video was not organically conceived, and then what you've learned about how it was created. And that's what the story's about. And we talk about sort of sectioning off stories between like your opening, your nut graph, so what, why am I reading this? And then sections on the various aspects of it. And this does that quite well. We had a question.
I also wanted the students to see this because, there's nothing wrong with, maybe you got a tip, but maybe you don't fully have all the sources. And if you have a network or colleagues, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I heard this, but can you help me out with this? Because that's kind of what Jordan did. She came to Nashville for help with this, and it turned into a great story. There's no shame in maybe you have a tip, but you don't have all the resources to kind of dig in on it. Go and get, work, especially if you have colleagues who can help you with that. Always raise your hand and work together, because they worked together and came up with something better than either one of them could have done on their own.
Obviously, these cultural stories are becoming increasingly important. Do you have keys to reporting them well?
I think it's important to really kind of, do your research on it, especially if it's something that really doesn't affect your world and you don't kind of have that experience and perspective. That doesn't mean you can't cover it well. Definitely do your research, read, know what's going on in the world, and don't be afraid to kind of say, I don't know, but ask questions and try to find out. I think that that's what any good reporter is going to do. And that's definitely the key. And if you're not sure about what you're writing, or if, maybe you should phrase something differently, then definitely run it past somebody. I think that's, people do that with me all the time. Hey, can you take a look at this? Is this okay? What do you think? Lean on people who might be able to kind of give you a little guidance on that. But I think the main thing is just kind of, really paying attention and coming in with an open mind, and kind of know that people sometimes just have a different experience from you, but just don't discount that. Try to find out all you can about it and, report it as fairly as you can, and just get the information on it, even if it's something that maybe you don't think is your level of expertise. That doesn't mean you can't report it and report it well.
That's a really good answer. Um, uh, so I'm just going to use that as a transition to another issue that I'm sure you get asked about constantly, and that's your status as groundbreaker. You and I met at a meeting of the Association for Women in Sports Media, and you're, as far as I know, just the second woman to be the president of APSE.
So I'm the second African American, but I would be the fourth woman.
Fourth woman, okay.
Yeah.
But the first African American woman.
That is correct. That is a fact.
To run APSE. And
yeah.
so, I would imagine this is something you faced your entire career, that you're always going to be tripping firsts.
Right.
And how have you reconciled that to yourself to that? How have you toughened yourself against people who would say horrible things, or would just say, oh, how can a woman be qualified to?
Right. All the things we've heard, right?
There's
it's a few different things when you ask me a question like that, and a few different things I feel. Obviously, first off is a sense of pride, but also a little astounded at the same time. Like when you hear things like, you're the only Black woman running a sports section at a major metro in the United States. That's just mind blowing to me for a lot of reasons. That it's me, first of all, and I have this title, right, and this position, but also that newsrooms really, there's only one. You can't find other Black women who are qualified for this, so it's a few emotions going on there, right?
Sure.
When I hear that. But you say the first, and and I'm always mindful of that, and always very grateful and thrilled about that. But at the same time, I try not to focus on first. I just want to make sure I'm not the last. So whatever I can do to kind of improve that, right? Where if I'm just maybe talking to more women about, hey, management, have you thought about that? That can be for you. We need your perspective. We need your voice. I just kind of talk to people and try to sell them on management. Because listen, not everyone wants to be an editor, especially people get into this business and they want to be writers. And maybe I'm veering off a little bit, but it's all kind of tied together. Editor it's not really the glamour position. You get in here, you want to be a writer or you want to be on TV, and that's fine. But editing, it's so important, management editing, because not only are you shaping stories, you're shaping coverage, but not only that, but you might have a little bit of say in, shaping your newsroom. Because if you're in management, you're an editor. Hiring. Yeah, you could be hiring or have a say maybe in who's brought in, or at least kind of be in a position where you can recommend someone and someone's really going to take a look at that person, So that is so important too. So I think about that in my role is another thing I try to do. But, above all, I always try to just go and be the example, or be someone that someone can look to. Because, if you don't see Black women in these roles and you're a young Black woman, maybe you don't think that that's for you or you can achieve it. But when you see it, then you're like, okay, maybe I can do that. Yeah. And I always like to share the story of Raina Cash, who she worked at the Sporting News, and then she became an NFL editor in Minneapolis. And then she went on to become the sports editor in Louisville at the Courier-Journal. So I had moved on from the Buffalo News. I was at the Undefeated at the time. So the only Black woman running a sports section suddenly was not there anymore, right? So Raina Cash comes behind me. She gets that job, and it's great, right? So I send her a congratulatory note on Twitter. And I said, Raina, this is everything. And her response, I share this story all the time because it's the best compliment I've ever gotten. And if you ask me, like, how do I kind of, go through things and kind of manage it and deal with it, this is what makes it all worth it. Because she said to me, because of you, I knew it was possible. And if you can have a career like that and someone can look to what you do and maybe want to do this and, and maybe open doors and, have more. So you're not talking about Lisa Wilson's the first this or the first that, if there's 10 Lisa Wilsons and I had something to do with that, then all of this would have been worth it. And so I always, whatever I do in this role, like I said, there's so many different feelings and emotions about it, but I always just try to be someone that someone can look to and say, hey, maybe I can do that too.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We've got on the editor-reporter relationship, we have a
Okay.
really nice question. Um, uh, in your capacity as an editor, what kind of balance do you try to strike um, between pitching ideas to your reporters compared to them pitching to you?
Okay. I prefer that they pitch to me. I will come in with
Mhm.
ideas, obviously, but I like a reporter who really has 4 or 5 ideas and we talk about it and we pick the best ones, because I feel if it's your idea, you're just going to be more invested in that story, right? You brought it to me. Obviously,
Absolutely.
you have a passion for it, right? So,
Mhm.
and if you bring me 4 or 5 ideas, chances are, unless something is going on, I just really need you to get on it. I'm not going to be giving you ideas that maybe you don't like. Well, we've all been assigned stories where we're like,
Yeah,
really?
right.
We're like, okay, right? But if you come to me with 4 or 5, I'm not going to be doing that as much. So I like reporters to pitch stories to me. Um, I do have to assign them at times. And a part of the skills of being a manager is I never try to say, okay, you have to do this. That's just not my
Mhm.
style. If it's something they maybe are a little skeptical of or don't want to do, then I'll kind of talk about why I think this would be good for you to do, or why I think it would be a good story for us to report it. And generally we go back and forth and maybe we tweak the idea a little bit. But eventually we get to that spot where we can both agree and do that story. And I think it's really because my style isn't like, well, no, this is what we're doing. Essentially,
Right,
I'm giving this to you, you're going to have to do it. But I try to sell it to you in a way where maybe you see where I'm coming from on this and you get as excited about the idea as I am.
right, right. I always felt that if I'm having to even even not routinely, but steadily, occasionally, come up with ideas for you, you're not doing your job that well,
Right,
because I'm one of the beauties of being an editor, right, is that you're touching 10 stories a day.
right.
And so you have a little bit, sometimes you're just like blowing the magic dust on them, and sometimes you're, pulling them all apart. And it really comes down to, uh, if the writer is the one who owns it, probably going to come out better a
Yeah,
lot of the time.
exactly. And it's like you said, especially if you're covering a beat, you should know your beat
Yeah,
inside and out, right? I
absolutely.
shouldn't really have to assign you very many stories on that beat unless it's just some kind of trend or some bigger picture story I'm kind of
Right, or
seeing.
just how it,
Then maybe you
just
are if you just caught up in the day to day. Yeah. Or something I want you to do with someone else where it's like a group project or something.
just
That
how it
might be
looks
it.
to the rest of the world or something,
Right. But if it's on your beat, you should be bringing me those stories. You should
Right.
always have a list, and we have a lot of writers, and a lot of writers I work with my career have that, but we have a lot of writers at the idea athletic who maybe have, so many ideas they can't even get to them all. And that's great. That's what you want. You want to constantly be pitching ideas.
You will appreciate that one time when I was the Buffalo correspondent at the Associated Press, I was asked to write, a big storm had hit New York City that hadn't hit Buffalo. And so I was asked to write a story about Buffalo laughing at New York City. Uh,
Right. Oh, that's funny.
yeah, it came out pretty well. It's good. Let me just, speaking of Buffalo, one of my colleagues, Kurt Chandler, asks, after working in a traditional newsroom and working for a virtual product, what are the pros and cons of physically working side by side with other journalists on your team?
Very good question. This is a remote newsroom and we make it work, but I'd say the biggest difference between here and the Buffalo News is, Buffalo News, we're sitting around together, like I said, back when the world was normal and you're sitting in the
Mhm.
newsroom. We're sitting there for 7 hours a night. Sometimes stories just develop organically, just through
Yes.
conversation. Like, wow, that'd be a good story,
Yeah.
and that's some give and take with 3 or 4 people where you're talking about these things, or maybe you're working that night, you're laying the paper out and you're talking about, boy, that'd be a good follow, because you're just kind of corresponding and talking with someone back and forth. So I think that's the main thing and main difference, is that a lot of times you're talking on someone on Slack, at
Mhm.
the Athletic, or you're on the phone with one person. But unless you're organizing like a group call, which we do have for national, like we'll have a conference call, but you're really not around each other as much, and you're kind of missing, you're not in your 4:30 news meeting and that kind of thing. So some of the things that develop organically or naturally just kind of aren't happening when you're working remotely.
Yeah. Um, we've had the question. Um, are you still a Bills fan?
I'm
I
actually,
knew this. I knew this would come up.
well, as we know, when we're in sports media, we're not really, you kind of like distance yourself from all the teams. So I kind of do that just because you want to maintain that level of objectivity. But what if I told you I really wasn't a Bills fan? I was more of a Oakland, now Las Vegas Raiders fan.
Wow.
You might
Okay.
be surprised to know that.
How did that develop?
I'll date myself with this again, but Marcus Allen's rookie year was one of the years where I really had just started getting into football. And for
Okay.
some reasons we were getting like a lot of the Raiders games at the 4:00 game here. That's what that would be. Got a
Yeah.
lot of Raiders games. And, I started like in watching Marcus Allen. I really got into the Raiders and the whole mystique and the cast offs. And, I kind of
Right.
picked the team up from there and have
Autumn
stuck
wins
with
a pirate.
them, which is not always easy, but you can't accuse me of being a front runner because listen, I've had some ups and downs being a Raiders fan. Yeah. But I'll tell you, it's good to see to answer your question, it's great to see the Bills doing well because it's a lot more fun in Buffalo when the Bills are winning. I remember their Super Bowl years and just, how the town came together and you saw all the Bills flags flying and stuff. Yeah, it's a lot more fun in Buffalo when the Bills are doing well. And, these fans here deserve it. They're loyal. You see them out at the airport, even after losses, greeting the team at 2
That's
a.m,
amazing.
and so it's really good to see. So I'm glad to see the Bills doing well for Buffalo.
That's great. Uh, I've got a couple of questions here from folks. Hope asks, you mentioned using Twitter. How do you utilize social media as both a reporter and editor?
So in the editor's role, I'm more kind of sharing stories or that kind of thing, or like in my APSE role, sharing job announcements or,
Sure.
but it's I'm more promoting the work of people on Twitter now as an editor. As a reporter, wow, you're kind of building your brand on Twitter, right? You know what I mean? You're out there, you're more out there with you not only sharing your stories, but sharing opinions, maybe things you're hearing on your beat, but you wouldn't write a full-fledged story on, and the beauty of Twitter now is there's writers I can follow all over the country where when I started in this business, I wouldn't be able to do that, right? So you're getting out there, and not only to people who follow you, not only to people to follow your teams, but maybe even other editors or, hiring managers out there in the country who might keep an eye on young talent, so you can use Twitter for that to kind of get yourself out there. And you say, wow, this person's kind of knowledgeable on what they're doing. I'm looking for a college football writer or whatever, I think Twitter can kind of have an effect that way. But I think for me, that's the main, how I use it as an editor as opposed to how a reporter might use it.
Sure.
It's a lot more of me trying to promote our work rather than my own.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not going to say, look at this headline I wrote, you know what I mean? Or anything like that, or look at this section I laid out. I'm not going to really, if it's a good section, it'll be more like when I was at the news, I would just show, okay, we all work together on this cover. It looks great. But it's more team than really promoting what I'm doing.
Right. The Athletic's a great platform for good writing. Do you have any plans to develop the visuals game a little bit more at this point?
As far as like art in our stories?
Yeah, or like now, well, I mean like multimedia, straight up video.
Yeah, we tried video for a little bit and it just wasn't really getting that much of a response. So we kind of cut back on that. But what we are doing now is a little bit more in building out our podcast. So we're a little bit more in the audio game than we are yeah.
So it's more about knowing what your audience is.
Yeah, right. That's one thing the Athletic will try things, but if it doesn't look like it's working, then they're kind of not afraid to pull back on it either. And that's kind of, I don't know if we'll ever go back into having a video team.
That's interesting.
And that's not to say you don't use video. Like if you're out at an event, obviously you're taking video and putting it on Twitter and things like that. But as far as on our own platform, having video storytelling, we've kind of, pulled away from that a little bit.
That's interesting because it makes sense in a way. Like not in a way, it makes sense that, House of Highlights, ESPN, you've got to make a huge investment. Our friend Jake asks another good question. Obviously, in this day and age, journalism seems to be a 24/7 commitment with the way news breaks and stories flow and whatnot. How important is it to unplug once in a while, and how do you unplug?
That's a great question. It's hard. it's hard for me to unplug. You know, that's not to say I don't relax sometimes or sit down and catch up on Netflix or, you know, whatever I'm going to do, or just sit and really do nothing at all. I will do that. But what I find it hard to do is shut my phone off, that kind of thing, you know, and even if my bosses say, hey, if you're on vacation, don't check Slack, you know, turn your phone off. I always feel like I'm going to be missing something. So even when I'm on vacation, I do find myself checking Slack or, you know, talking to reporters on vacation. I don't recommend this. This is just a bad habit I've picked up over the years. But if you know, if I'm unplugging, what I try to do is maybe just do something, you know, for myself for a little while, you know, maybe go get a manicure or something, you know, something where I could just get away for a little bit, kind of turn my mind off and then kind of come back to it. So, you know, I take a little bit of time, or maybe I have a 13-year-old, so maybe I'm doing something with my daughter, you know, I'm taking her out for a little bit, you know, and spending a little time with her. But, you know, for me personally, just in my role, it's a little hard to just completely shut the world out. But, you know, in this, you know, you're going to want to do that coming up in this business, otherwise you'll burn yourself out. So definitely take the time away when you can do it. You know, it's 24/7, but you do have vacation time. You do have some weekends. So don't be afraid to take a little bit of time off. You know, if something's really going down, your editor will find you some kind of way, right? So yeah, but definitely you don't burn yourself out, or not turn your phone off on vacation. Especially, you know, me just being in charge of the whole group, it's tough for me to do. But certainly others in my group do that, and they should do that, and I encourage that.
That's great. I guess I want to ask a little bit about what, I don't want to get too advicey at this point, but like what kinds of skills do you see as being important as we come up in the next 3 to 5 years, as this crop of undergraduates is reaching their early professional career? If you want to be in sports journalism, are there particular skills that you need to develop that you think are really important?
Yeah, you know, at this point, I say try to develop all of them, you know, not just your writing skills, but you want to kind of, you know a little bit about audio. You know, there's so many opportunities to podcast now. You know, having some experience in that is great, because what you want to do is, I guess to use a scouting term, just have a lot in your toolbox that you can offer when you're looking for a job, because you never know what's open, what you might want. And maybe what you have on your resume sets you apart from another candidate if you can not only write and write different kinds of stories. You know, it's also important when you have your links you send, that you send a different variety. We can talk about this a little bit more, but to answer this question, you know, not only that you can write and maybe do audio, but, you know, just because The Athletic doesn't shoot video doesn't mean that many other outlets don't. So know how to shoot video. You know, if you can shoot video and edit video, wow, you know, and if you happen to have even done a run on the school paper where you can lay out, you know, you've worked with InDesign and those kind of things, all that is so important. So in your college years, I would just try to do as much as you can and make yourself as marketable to employers as you can, because you've done a variety of things.
How should you pitch yourself?
It's interesting. Your cover letter, I like to talk about cover letters because I never knew what horrible cover letters I wrote throughout my career. I'm just glad it didn't really burn me, but I would spend so much time on my resume, and the cover letter was pretty much an afterthought. It's just something I have to type up, and it would be kind of very simple where, you know, please enclose, find my resume. I think I'd be an asset to your organization. Just horrible. You know, I think about what I used to put in the cover letters. And what I found when I began sitting in the role of someone who takes in many, many resumes, I found that a good cover letter was setting these apart, you know, because like I talk about having multiple skills, right? A lot of people have multiple skills. And so I just have a piece of paper. I haven't met you. I haven't talked to you, right? So I'm going through and, you know, on paper, a lot of people look like good applicants. So what can I learn about you other than your skills? Well, I can learn something about you from that cover letter. And I've gotten some really good cover letters over the years that have made me maybe not hire that person as an intern or hire them, but at least want to call them, you know, and maybe talk to them and bring them in for an interview because they told me a story or something about themselves. And that could be maybe why you want to be a sports journalist. You know, I think that that's very interesting. Why do you want to get into this? Why should I hire you? What is your passion for this? And that's been stories from a kid who had a stuttering problem, and sports journalism helped him with that because it kind of brought him out of his shell. He told a story of how he got up in class to answer a question. He started to stutter. It couldn't get out. He just sat down. But he talked about being a sports journalist, having to go out and interview people, how that helped him with his confidence and how he became more outgoing, and how sports journalism did that for him. So I was touched by that story. I called him in for an interview because I wanted to talk to him more. And he ended up being our intern. He was great and did a great job. But he told me that story in his cover letter, and that made me want to call him. Another one was a kid who talked about when his dad was sick. And he would go out to cover games, and he talked to his dad before he went out. And his father told him, write what I can't see on TV. And the kid would go and do this, and he said it was the best advice he ever got, and he uses it to this day, you know, and what he does. That made me want to talk to you, you know what I mean? It's like, wow, you know, or someone who told me I've wanted to do this since I was 5 or something. So your cover letter can really sometimes be the difference, you know. Don't be afraid to tell this employer not only what you can bring, but maybe why you have a passion for this job, or something that might set your resume apart from the hundreds of others they're getting, something that's going to kind of make you memorable and stand out. So I tell that to students a lot now, you know, put a little extra time into your cover letter, and it can pay off for you.
Question I hadn't thought of, somebody asked, I'm going to sort of broaden it out. They asked specifically about the NFL, but access is an ongoing issue for reporters covering sports. And what are some of the, it asked what the worst, but I'll ask what the best and worst is about access right now in the leagues. I know we're in a particular time with the pandemic, and that may have implications going on, but what are some of the things that have caught your attention about what the leagues are up to in terms of allowing reporters to do their job?
Well, now this is very interesting because this is going to be an issue for APSE. It's just bound to be, right? And we've been on calls with the league because, you know, we know access isn't going to be what it was, but we want it to be as best as we can, you know, sticking to safety protocols and everything. We want to make sure that we can do our jobs as best as we can. So, you know, there've been a few instances, but right now the leagues, you know, they can rely on, this is the medical advice we're getting. Now we can't really, as a group, go against medical advice, right? We got to try to work with them as best we can. So maybe we can kind of negotiate, okay, well, could we do this? Or, you know, could you get an extra photographer in here or something? That's kind of the things we've been doing, is just to see if we can kind of work with the leagues. It's worked out pretty well. I think what we're going to have to worry about is, once things are getting back to normal, will access return to what it was? And this might even go past my presidency because, you know, I go from June to June. So I think next summer is when you're going to start to see maybe things are opening up a little bit. And are things going back to normal, or are we trying to restrict? And I think that's when APSE is, you know, we're going to be paying attention to this all along, but I think that's when we're really going to have to get involved and kind of see, you know, okay, this is not a health and safety issue anymore. You know, can we return access to what it was? But back to that question, you know, as kids who cover college sports, I know college access is historically just not good, right? You know, but NFL is a little better, right? Because it was always open locker room, and you could, you know, spend 45 minutes, right, and get your stuff. That has changed this year, and it's one of the things that really, you know, for the Athletic, like I said, was great. I talked about Stephen Holder going into the locker room, or someone just kind of hanging after the game for a little longer than maybe other reporters could to get stuff. That's all wiped away this year because all the access is Zoom, right? So everyone's got to try to get creative with their coverage now, you know, and cover things a little differently with the access. And, you know, it's interesting because not everyone's traveling to games. So our writers are coming up with different ways to cover a game because, you know, you're covering it on TV for, you know, all intents and purposes, but how can you make that stand out? And we've had some really like interesting ideas. You know, our Chiefs writer covered the game on the couch with his dad, the reason he got into football, and did this really heartwarming story. This is the first time I really sat there and watched it because I didn't travel to the game. I got to actually watch it with my dad, and his son was there, and it was 3 generations. It was just a really cool way to kind of tell a story of covering the game. A couple of our Bills writers went to like a sports book to watch the game. You know, so people are kind of getting creative with what they have to do for access. And generally, it's pretty good in the NFL, but this year everybody's kind of at the same disadvantage of, you know, you're only getting what you're getting on Zoom, and you just kind of got to make that work this year. and hope that once it's safe to do so, you're going to get back some of that locker room access, because that's where a lot of the best stories develop, where you could just sit with someone one-on-one, you know, where you're not on a camera, you can really get to know them and kind of dig in and tell their story.
And I'm just going to say to my sports writing students, see, when we covered the Chiefs opening night, I said, you're covering it just like the pros.
Right. And this year, that is true. That's true. Statement has never been more true this year. Yeah.
I think younger reporters in particular worry about balancing access versus wanting to potentially tell a story that may worsen or hinder access later on down the road. How do you balance that?
I mean, knowing that you have to tell the story, you know, I mean, look, you worry about losing your access, but, you know, if you have a story to tell, you know, the journalist in you is going to tell that story. You just can't, you know, you just have to hope that you told it fairly, that you know, you'd be surprised if you try to get someone's side of the story, even if it's a tough story or a controversial story. You'll be surprised sometimes that can go a long way. You know, it can be, I'm going to report this. There's nothing you can really say to make me not report it, but I did want to call you and get your side. I want to get your side to this. I want to tell this story fairly. Sometimes that goes a long way, even with a tough story that you're going to have to report. But yeah, you can't, you know, I mean, leagues or teams will threaten to pull your credentials all the time and that stuff. Really, if you have a story that you have to tell, you can't let that stop you. You know, you got.
If it's a good enough story, they're not going to be in a position to do that because of backlash.
Right.
Let me. We're a little bit past the 8 o'clock hour now, so.
Wow, this is great. This is an hour seemed like a long time. This has really flown by. Yeah.
I hope it has for everybody out there. Let me just ask you to, let's just wrap up, and let me just ask you to give everybody your best advice for their career as they're, you know, looking whether it's in sports or not. As all sorts of students here tonight.
So a lot of your students are already doing one of the pieces of advice I always give young folks, and that is to join the professional organizations. You know, you have an awesome chapter, an APSE chapter, and that's great because the relationships you build there are great for support, for networking, for finding a mentor. You know, I can't stress mentorship enough. Find a mentor, you know, and you can have more than one. The more, the better. But someone who's really going to talk to you and not only praise you, but kick you in your butt when you need it. That's what all journalists or anybody really in any profession, I think, needs that. Someone they can really talk to, someone who's going to give it to them straight, you know, tell them when they've done a good job and tell them when they haven't done a good job. That's how you grow. You know, mentorship is so important. Another bit of advice I'll give is don't be afraid to reach out to organizations you might want to work for and start a dialogue, even if they're not hiring. You know, there were people who would send me resumes or clips at the Buffalo News. We weren't hiring, but they stayed in touch with me. And they said, okay, you know, if I didn't have anything for them, they say, okay, well, if you wouldn't mind, would it be okay if from time to time I sent you some of my clips? I never said no to that, right? I don't think many editors will. And I kind of remember the people who kind of reach out to me, and I know that they're really interested in working here. Maybe it didn't work out in my shop, but someone else asked me, hey, do you know anybody who might fit this role? And if I've been talking to you and kind of have seen your development and know what you want to do, maybe I recommend you for another position and that works out. So don't be afraid to kind of reach out, get a dialogue going with editors. I have people who don't work for me, young writers, who will just say, hey, can I send you some of my clips? And maybe I don't get to them immediately, and I'll tell them that, but you know, we'll take a look at them. I don't know many editors who are really going to tell you no. So, I mean, don't be afraid to reach out to people and kind of just get that dialogue going. If it's a place where you really think you might want to work, or an editor you might want to stay in touch with who can kind of help you along the way to your path. You know, you don't want to do it weekly where you're constantly like calling, but just stay in touch from time to time. If you're in that city with that editor, when the world opens up again, like again, as I'm talking about a lot of things, but you know, once it's safe to do so again, maybe reach out and say, hey, would it be okay to meet for coffee? You know, I just want to get some career advice. You'll be surprised how people in the business want to help you. So don't be afraid to kind of make those connections and ask.
That's great. Thank you so much for your time. We just wish you a ton of luck, both as APSE president and in your new role at The Athletic, which is look forward to reading every day.
Yeah, thank you
And
guys. I appreciate you. Normally people really don't want to hear what editors have to say, so I appreciate you hanging in there for an hour. If you guys ever wanted to reach out to say hello, I could give you my email. It's pretty easy to remember. It's just lwilson@theathletic.com. If you ever want to reach out and say hello, or just, take some of the advice I've given you, just feel free to reach out to me. And I really appreciate you having me tonight.
great, thank you. Will,
Okay.
we'll let you close out the meeting. So long, folks.
Okay. Thank you so much, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Nice to meet you.
Okay. Bye-bye.